Thank you, Bridget. And I would like to thank Richard and the meeting organizers for inviting me to present today on the topic of justice-informed HIV cure trials with ATIs. But first, I would like to say that the Pre-CROI Community Cure Workshop changed my life exactly 10 years ago. It was in February 2014 that I first attended this meeting, and I realized we can have amazing conversations between biomedical researchers and community and come together in meaningful dialogue. So thank you, Richard, for keeping this meeting going. It is really important to have these conversations. So here is my proposed outline. If I can move my slides. Okay, there it is. Great. So we'll talk about justice-informed HIV cure trials with ATIs, and then we'll talk about what we're learning so far from the social behavioral research, and then we'll discuss. And this will be the more human side of ATI treatment interruption trials. And I do want to apologize in advance if some more sensitive or delicate topics are being raised in this conversation. So what is justice in research ethics? Justice is actually very narrowly defined as the fair distribution of benefits and risks in research. Justice is what forbids us from exposing one group of people to the risk of the research solely to benefit another group. And now we can all argue about the need to broaden the definition of justice in clinical research to account for the different kinds of justices and just is, at the risk of sounding like Dr. Seuss. That would be another presentation for another day. So Dr. Amaya Perez-Brewer from the University of Toronto and myself recently published a viewpoint paper around the need for justice-informed HIV cure-related trials with ATIs. But what does that mean? A call for justice-informed HIV trials with ATIs demands an acknowledgement of the geographical locations and communities that make this research possible. For example, in research-limited settings, how are risks minimized and benefits maximized? We know it's all about the risk, but how do we create some benefits? And how are accountability processes integrated? Scaling up ATI trials is not exactly the same as scaling up ARVs that have immediate clinical benefit for patients. That was 20 years ago. We can't forget that. It's not so long ago. So as ATI trials are scaled up, a clear roadmap for prioritizing high-quality and well-supported trials will be essential. And given the promise of HIV cure, integrating community input into trial design and implementation, and taking up those community recommendations alongside comprehensive and evidence-based psychosocial support, inclusive of partner protection that was raised earlier, will be crucial to enhancing innovation, but also equity in research that will center community and patient participant well-being. So why social science? This slide shows why social behavioral research is critically important. Basically, it helps us prepare sites and communities for upcoming clinical trials. It is critical to the effective translation of research. It provides a bridge to patients, participants, communities, and importantly, in the spirit of justice-informed research, it helps us assess and proactively mitigate potential risks, broadly defined, including psychosocial risks. So this slide shows now a 5-year-old application of behavioral and social science research. And we define research priorities related to basic, elemental, supportive, integrative BSSR, behavioral and social science research. The categories that we're most interested in today are elemental BSSR, improving behavioral and social interventions, for example, partner protections, and supportive BSSR, strengthening biomedical HIV product development and clinical trials. So what are we learning so far? So this is a recently completed interview study done as part of an extended ATI trials in Philadelphia that was testing the combination of broadly neutralizing antibody and interferon 2B alpha. This was part of the Beat HIV Delaney Collaboratory 1.0. So for example, in this study, one of the participants felt that he let the community down when his virus rebounded during the ATI. For another participant, trial outcomes differed from expectations. The participants really hoped the ATI would last longer. Another participant felt a little depressed having to go back on ART. But all of the participants really felt incredibly supported throughout their participation, and they felt valued throughout their ATI. And that's what made the difference. Based on these findings, we generated considerations to inform future HIV cure trials with ATIs in collaboration with the VHIV community members. So there are 13 of them, but we're only going to focus on 5 and 6. So participants' experience during ATI trials will be highly heterogeneous. HIV cure research trial teams should be attuned to participants' tolerance, not only for physical risk, but also potential psychosocial side effects. And we know that capturing people's lived experience can complement medical assessments. And the mental, emotional, and social impact of being part of a cure trial should not be underestimated. In another study conducted in San Francisco, this was the JAWS study, the 5-intervention trial, so DNA vaccine administered through electroporation, MVA boost, TLR, agonist, combination BNAbs, 34 weeks in ATI, and then potential ATI for up to 52 weeks. So in this study, there were few participants, 10 or 11 people took part in the study. We did interviews with 7 of those. One of the participants recounted going on a roller coaster of emotions. So I definitely had expectation. I definitely went on a roller coaster of emotion for sure. And I don't want you thinking that I was flippant or laissez-faire about it. I didn't have expectations because I absolutely did. I posted a lot on social media about this, and I had a feeling, this feeling of a lot of responsibility for all these people. And to have to post that the experiment didn't work, I felt like a failure. The same participant spoke about his anxiety of having to go to the ATI, of going up and going down, and being really invested in the success of the trial and becoming and staying virally suppressed. A participant who achieved a sustained post-intervention control said, what they told me was that the point of this particular study was to see what would happen when the viral rebounded, and that never happened. The participant was able to become a post-intervention controller. Well, this sucks because no one really knows. No one wants to use the C word, the cured word, because going back to those other people who thought they were cured, all these scientists said in the media, and then the virus came back. So it's like no one wants to use the word, and then, it just keeps me in limbo. If people ask me what's going on, I have no idea. But a key finding from the San Francisco study is that there was an overall underestimation of the challenges associated with partner protection. The site had a partner protection plan in place that was done in collaboration with the CAB, so Jeff Taylor, Danielle Campbell, and Didi. That was led by Michael Peluso. So this is in San Francisco, an area where PrEP is widely, we can argue, accessible and acceptable. Communities are relatively knowledgeable about you equals you. It's also a setting of low incidence and prevalence of intimate partner violence. But in this study, 4 out of 7 participants interviewed experienced difficulties around partner protections during the extended ATI. The partner protection were more difficult as time progressed. There was discomfort with intimacy. Finding out whether partners were on PrEP was very difficult. People were out of practice with these conversations. One partner took emergency PEP, provoking anxiety and the need for additional support. And partners also had particular desires that coincided with the period of time when the participant became detectable. And I could read this quote here, but it's actually really long. So, in addition to the qualitative study, we're also capturing mental health assessments during the ATI. So, for example, you can see anxiety and depression measures from ATI initiation that is shown by the green star. So we're working on validating patient and participant reported outcome measures specific to the ATI and HIV cure research. We hope to have more data to show later this year. Our abstract for CROI did not get accepted, so we can't break the embargo, unfortunately. Sorry about that. our sample size are really small. So it's really hard to show significance of these results for conferences like CROI. It is what it is. So here are considerations for implementing combination HIV cure trials with ATIs, and we should focus on the psychosocial and the behavioral factors. So for example, becoming and remaining detectable for HIV during ATIs can be a stressor. ATIs are accompanied with viremia-related worry, which will likely increase with higher viral load measures, and viremia worry may be lesser for individuals with prior experience with prior detectable status, but will need to be thoroughly considered in the year of use. And then in terms of the behavioral factor, we talked about the challenges associated with partner protection during the ATI. So some of these may be self-explanatory, but we still need to spell them out. So Dr. Barr explained the different trials happening in the ACTG, so we are able to incorporate social behavioral sciences with some of those. So there's a planned social behavioral research component as part of the PAUSE trial. This one will include both closed-ended surveys with all participants and then in-depth interviews with a subset of sites and participants. And there will be 3 time points, one at entry, one post ATI, and then one at the end of the study or early discontinuation. So we'll have retrospective insights from the ATI. From the females rising through education, sport, and health cohort in South Africa, which is led by Dr. Chris Pedong, who's the clinical director, we have been embedding social behavioral sciences from the beginning. We found that formative research was absolutely critical to inform how to mitigate potential risk for participants and their partners, particularly in the setting of high intimate partner violence. For example, we learned from the community that disclosure of HIV and ATI should not be required. But if a participant wishes to disclose, then we should support her as much as possible. So SBR is helping us navigate how to support people through the ATI. And at this site, we're also implementing a trauma-informed and healing-centered design and collaborating with an amazing local scientist, Maud Tembu at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. This is a study done on increasing racial, ethnic, gender, and sex diversity in HIV cure research with ATIs. It was done during the COVID pandemic, so it's about 4 years old now. And we found in this study that attention must be paid to gender and power dynamics and partnership dynamics. We should pay attention to intersectionality and equity. ATIs will have both positive and negative impacts on stigma for both participants and their partners. And we'll need to be able to bridge the field of HIV cure research with HIV prevention. So speaking of which, there's also a lot of work in the last year on creating a partner protection package or P3 framework for HIV cure trials with ATIs. And there's also a group, Katie already mentioned it, the Partner Protection Working Group in the ACTG that created the toolkit. And so we have to thank people like Tom Villa, Bill Freshwater from the community who really volunteered for this and really showed up for the community, so thank you. And Michael mentioned this before. We'll need to see how partner protections interact with the new WHO policy brief on the role of HIV viral suppression in improving individual health and reducing HIV transmission. So we love the lighting system here to explain this in simple infographic language, but we'll need to see how this interact with ATI trials, and particularly on the messaging side and how it informs our restart criteria, as Michael mentioned. This was done outside of the context of ATI trials, but we'll need to see how it all fits together. So there's also a 4-part series published throughout 2023 and 2024 as part of Positively Aware. So I'm very grateful to Rick Blasco for making this happen with us, and Tom Villa. So where people share their stories on being part of an HIV cure trial with ATIs. Some people were cured, like Adam Castillero, the London patient, or Paul Edmond, the City of Hope patient. Lori Willenberg achieved a state of exceptional elite control, or as she calls herself, she's a neutralizer. But other people had to go back on the ART following the ATI and also talked about their journey. And even people who went back on ART wanted more psychosocial support after they were back on ART. So what we're learning from this is that we'll need to adopt a journey approach to ATI participation. We'll need a lot more research to understand what people need before, during, and after their ATIs, and how to better meet their psychosocial needs. For example, and Katie's already mentioned it, support around decision-making, partner protections, balancing risks and burdens with safety, and there'll be different outcomes, so we'll need to be very proactive about what will be needed for people who are back on ART, for people who are in a state of post-intervention control, and for people who achieve cure. And on the policy side, we'll need to be very proactive to preserve social benefits of people who achieve cure. We should already be having a congressional briefing on the Hill about cure research and how we're going to protect, ADAP and Medicaid, Medicare, and all of those benefits, housing benefits, disability benefits for people who achieve cure, because otherwise it would be a deterrent to being part of a cure study. And Jeff and I are learning this from the long-term survivor study. Okay, so another emerging topic is the advent of HIV, LA treatment, and how these will interact with ATIs. So obviously one precludes the other at the moment. So there was just a small qualitative study published on this, and here are just some of the considerations from this study. So there'll be a unique window of opportunity to counsel people with maybe around ATIs before switching to long-acting. So if a person is on oral daily ART and wants to switch to long-acting, this would be a window to help them do an ATI if they're interested. Because once they're on long-acting, it's going to be so much harder to go back on oral daily pills and then be part of an ATI. Unless we can get rid of ATIs altogether, then everybody can participate in cure research. We can do reservoir measurement and so on. So until we rely on ATIs, people who are long-acting will be excluded unless they meet certain criteria. We'll also need to support people to make decisions and help them navigate around the evolving landscape of novel HIV therapeutics. It's about to get really complicated. We're going to talk long-acting pills. I mean, there's a lot that's going to be a lot of new technologies, and we'll need to be able to explain everything in lay terms and help navigate not just patient participants, but also their providers. And people will have different preferences, so we'll need to better understand them. We'll need to understand the psychosocial and the structural factors that may create systemic inequities in access to these novel interventions. And there's an urgent need to engage with providers. But even when we have long-acting, there will still be a critical role for HIV cure research. And we'll also need to acknowledge the social context. So with that said, I am left with sources of hopes and sources of worries that I would like to share with you. And I told Richard that I was going to write a love letter to the Pre-CROI Community Cure Workshop, but I ran out of time. So this is my love letter to you all. So from the heart, I'm going to share some sources of hopes. My source of hopes right now is that an increasing number of biomedical researchers are recognizing the importance of social behavioral sciences to facilitate and inform recruitment, retention, and support of participants. And we have more and more champions on our side, people like Krista Dong, Thumbin Du, Steve Deeks, Michael Peluso, Katie Barr, who helped us establish the partner protection working group. At the Fresh site in South Africa, FBR is increasing our understanding of how to safely navigate women through their ATIs, including measures to support disclosure when desired and partner protection. And we're also implementing a trauma-informed and healing-centered framework for young women. Katie's already mentioned the 2024 consensus meeting in Nairobi that will help update the guidelines around ATIs, and also an increasing number of groups recognize the critical influence of social behavioral research and ethics in research. Jill has talked about the Melbourne HIV Cure Research Consortium. Remco is here with us today. The Spiral Consortium in the Netherlands that will do more research in non-subtype B will actually do a lot of social behavioral sciences and actually front-load social behavioral sciences in research-limited setting, which is really exciting. And also the Beat HIV Delaney Collaboratory has an established working group right now. But these are my worries, and that's what keeps me up at night. So we still have very limited formative research in research-limited settings where ATIs are planned to be scaled up. We also need to build the SBR and the psychosocial support infrastructure. We also need a lot more evidence around effective partner protections and lessons learned in real term. And we should integrate social behavioral sciences as part of trials, because right now we're expected to do it outside of the clinical trial, and the funding doesn't run parallel with the clinical trial. So we're always kind of trying to catch up. So it's been really challenging. And then there's an assumption that other people will take care of it. And then at CROI, we should also, because we have smaller sample sizes, it's really hard to highlight our science in the main programs. We're very grateful to have been invited to talk about this here. So some of the challenges that people like me deal with, we're having to have to explain to reviewers why ATIs would be anxiety provoking for people with HIV. So our reviewers may not fully understand HIV co-research, and so a lot of our grants, actually, my grants, don't get discussed. So instead of doing the research, it's like, no, not discussed, and it's really discouraging. So here's a love letter that we once wrote to a reviewer. Years of HIV campaigns in Africa and globally have pounded home the message that adherence to a daily pill is critical to avoid the development of resistance. But those circumstances enable them to embrace high-level treatment adherence. And we would argue that even those who have occasional or even frequent periods of treatment default, the idea of knowingly stopping treatment may produce anxiety. And so we need to measure the impact of ATIs and proactively mitigate the risk and provide support. So anyhow, we want a cure, we want HIV cure research, but we also want to make sure that participants are adequately supported in the process. And with that, I will leave you all with the following questions. What does justice-informed cure research mean to you? Should social behavioral research be embedded as part of trials? And what are some of the key social behavioral questions you would like answered? So thank you so much.